Oh gosh. All right. Well, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. I know several of you are filtering in. But as most of you know, my name is Casey Craig, and I'm the executive director for the Cute Syndrome Foundation. And I have my lovely SCNA warrior named Stella. And so this is our second episode of our Family and Researcher Roundtable, which is our fall education series. And when I was trying to think of different topics to talk about, a lot of our topics are always geared towards epilepsy, which obviously a lot of our kids struggle with. But we haven't had a whole lot of discussion and focus around some of the, and not saying that, if your child has epilepsy, they don't have behavior issues, but we haven't had a lot of focus and talk about the root, what the behavior challenges and really the impact it has on caregivers. And what kind of made me start thinking about this is I had several families that I was chatting with at different points in time over the last 2.5 years. And they would start to talk about, some of the behavior challenges that their child was experiencing. And then they would stop in their tracks and say, ooh, I don't want to complain. I don't want to vent because my daughter is on the very profoundly affected side seizure wise and medically wise. And I'm like, wait a minute. No, no. Yes, my journey is a lot of hospitalizations and surgeries and things like that, and a lot of medical equipment. But when I put Stella down in her wheelchair, I know she's going to stay there. Or when I put her down in her peapod chair, she's going to stay there. She's nonverbal, but she's also not talking back to me. I don't have to, she doesn't throw a fit whenever we walk into, a loud, overwhelming, environment. And I don't have parents judging me as much as I feel like some parents might feel in the behavior challenges realm. Because when you walk into a room, they automatically see me with my daughter in a wheelchair. And I already get a little bit of empathy, right? Of like, ooh, her life is not typical, right? But we have some of our parents that I know for a fact after talking to them that they walk into the room and they don't see their children. They don't see the challenges that they experience on a day to day. And instead of getting a little bit of empathy, they might feel judged. And so, with all of that said, I attended a conference earlier the Gatlinburg conference in Kansas City. We had not been to it before. TCSF had not sent any type of representative before, but it was in Kansas City, which is pretty close to me. And we thought, you know what? Let's go. I had a lot of resources, and it was kind of more geared towards the autism community. And so I didn't even introduce you yet. Gosh, this is where my mind is. We have Dr. Leanne DeWalt. And so I saw her poster, I know it was a collaborative effort, but I saw your poster and I took a picture of it and I talked to the presenter of the poster. And it was all about caregiver stress and how it relates to challenging behaviors. And I thought, this is it. This is the validation that I want to bring to our families that sometimes feel that maybe they're not able to vent. They're not able to really talk about how hard it is on them as a caregiver, but also as, their family. So without further ado, I want you to introduce yourself, Dr. DeWalt, talk a little bit about where you come from, and then we're super excited to dive into your chat.
Yeah, great. And I'm excited and I hope people will put things in the chat and we can have a little conversation. I have slides and some research data to share, but I love, just chatting as well. So I am Leanne DeWalt. I am at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, Wisconsin, and I study intellectual and developmental disabilities across the life course, particularly um, how the whole family goes through life together. So I'm really interested in the impact of having a child with a developmental difference on the family, as well as the things that families do to really be the glue and hold things together for their kids, and sort of that love that parents have for their kids and how that sort of sustains families over time. So,
Yeah.
are we ready? I can share some
I
slides.
think we're ready. Yep.
Great. Okay, and everybody just be so, kind and generous and patient as we figure out this. So, I will get it up. So here we go. Now, are you able to see? Let's see, I'm gonna try
Yep.
I had it and then I thought I did it. So we're gonna
No worries.
okay, so here we go. So do you see it now? Casey, can you see? Okay.
It's popping up. Yep, we're
All
good.
right, great. Okay, so thank you all. I'm going to talk today about difficult behavior, family stress, and then strategies to support well-being. And so first, what are difficult behaviors? When we use these lots of different words we might use, and I want to sort of give some examples of the types of behaviors that some individuals with disabilities may have. And then thinking about how that impacts families and their stress, and then what are strategies that support well-being for moms and dads and everybody in the family. Just so you know, some of the data I'm going to be pulling from a really large longitudinal study of adolescents and adults with autism. This is over 400 families participated in the study over time. But I'm also going to share that we have done studies of children with Fragile X syndrome, with Down syndrome, with other disabilities and healthcare conditions, as well as families who have children that don't have disabilities. So our whole body of work here in Wisconsin is trying to understand families and how they change over time and thinking about what's sort of common across all of these different developmental conditions and then maybe what's specific to certain types of syndromes or conditions. And just to put it out there that we know that families, when you have a child with a developmental difference, there may be some unique challenges compared to children that are neurotypical or typically developing. So often there can be some uncertainty around the diagnosis. So unless you had done prenatal testing or something, we often don't know maybe why our child is struggling a little bit or the differences we're seeing. And so there's this term called the diagnostic odyssey that many families go through, and that in and of itself can be stressful. Yeah, and then as children grow, we may, even after a diagnosis, there may be new health problems or the emergence of difficult behaviors or different things that need to be supported. And exactly like we were talking about just a second ago, sometimes if your child has more of what's like an invisible disability, so not in a wheelchair, there can be public misunderstanding and low tolerance for difficult behavior. So really a low tolerance for anyone that's not sort of falling in line like other you might want other children to do. And then I think it's really important to mention that in our country, it's very complicated. The systems of care, so navigating healthcare, the educational system, insurance, all of the different services and therapies and treatments and trying to navigate that on behalf of your child can be really complicated and can be a source of stress. So all of these could be different sort of additional challenges for parents. And I say, we didn't necessarily sign up for this, right? When you became a parent. And so these are some of the challenges that some people might face. And I want to talk specifically today about the difficult behaviors, because as we were talking, this is one of the things that maybe gets less attention for this group. So what are some difficult behaviors? So these are different types of difficult behaviors. Some people might use the words challenging behavior, behavior problem, but I don't want to sort of blame the child in any way. These are things that are differences in their brain and development. But some of the types of behaviors you might see could be unusual or repetitive behaviors. So doing the same things over and over again and really getting stuck and having difficulty transitioning to something else. Uncooperative behavior. Not listening, not following instructions, being withdrawn or inattentive. So sort of pulling away, not connecting emotionally with others, socially offensive behavior. So kind of doing the wrong thing at the wrong time, right? So talking really loudly, sort of screaming, or if for children that use words, maybe saying the wrong words at the wrong time. Disruptive behavior could be anything that's sort of interfering with what's going on. So like interrupting you, or um, being really clingy, or just interfering in some way. Some of the more significant types of difficult behaviors would be those that are being hurtful to someone else. So not just verbally hurtful, but maybe physically aggressive, or where you're damaging property. So sometimes if children are upset, they might rip things, or throw things, or even be hurtful to themselves. So
Mhm.
some children with developmental disabilities will bang their heads, or scratch themselves, or bite their hands or arms. And so these
Mhm.
are not things that everybody does, but I do want to know that if your child is engaging in these types of behaviors, it's not uncommon. So,
And
um,
I wanted to jump in really
mhm,
quick. The
yeah.
chat was disabled for a minute, but I got it to
Oh,
work.
okay,
So
good.
feel free, everybody, that you can, even if it's just like,
Mhm,
oh, yes, my child also does that, or,
yeah.
feel free to jump into the chat. And then if you want to, you can do the Q&A as well. But I think the chat might be the best place for us
Yeah.
to kind of talk today. So
Yeah, great.
go
And
ahead.
again, these types of behaviors, not all kids, not every single child is going to do them, but many will. And many typically developing children at times will have, difficult behaviors that we as parents can experience. But children with developmental differences, neurological differences, are more likely to have these types of behaviors. And on the next slide, I'm going to show some data. This is on children with Fragile X syndrome. And we were able to talk to their moms every day for 8 days in a row to try to understand every single day what the day was like. And um, as you can see here, the day, all those 8 days, so sort of like a week at a glance, almost all of the children had at least one of these behaviors in the 8 days. So over 90% of the children with Fragile X syndrome did have a day where they were having one of these behaviors that I talked about. The most common, so the first row you can see is any behavior at 90%. The next the most common type of behavior was that unusual or repetitive behavior. Um, Fragile X is a not very well known disorder, but a lot of children with Fragile X may also have autism or autism type features. So that's what sort of those unusual or repetitive behaviors are about. But uncooperative behavior, withdrawn or inattentive behavior. This is over, half of kids in a week are having these types of behaviors. And then you can see down at the bottom of this list, what's less common but does happen is the hurtful to others, or destructive to property, or even hurtful to oneself. But you could think about for these moms of kids with Fragile X, 15 to 20% of families of kids with Fragile X have children that are doing these harmful behaviors about once a week, or more.
Mhm.
So this is at least once a week. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that these types of behaviors do happen for children with developmental differences and specific disorders or syndromes, that we might see these behaviors. And that does create some stress for the
Yeah.
child, right?
Mhm.
That it can be, I don't know if everyone pause and think about, it can be hard to lose control or, realize you went too far, or that people are upset with
Mhm.
you. Like that doesn't feel good. And it can be hard to parent in those
Yeah.
situations when your child is losing control, or even just doing, sort of not going with the flow and having trouble sort of getting into the routine of the family. And so that's stressful for everyone.
Hmm. And we've had a couple of moms raise their hand
Oh,
on here. I'm like,
really?
yep, yep, I feel this, I understand this. And
Yeah.
something that was brought up in the chat, and I think that it might be really interesting to kind of talk about is One of the parents said her toddler demonstrates all of this, but it's hard to know if it's related to the actual
Yeah,
diagnosis or it's just being a typical 2 year
yeah,
old. And I think that could be hard for, a first time parent, but even like a second, it's just your second child because every kid is different. And so is there kind of a way for you to go, okay, yeah, no, this is abnormal, not typical. This is most likely due to, some type of
yeah,
diagnosis versus, oh,
yeah.
yeah, this is just a typical 2-year-old.
Yeah, and so I think that is a good question, and many parents have asked me that over time, including is this teenage behavior, right? Is this
Right.
just them sort of growing up? I would say that the way, like a psychologist or a pediatrician might think about that, it has to do with sort of the frequency. So how often are
Hmm.
these types of behaviors happening? And then the intensity of them, right? So how much is it really impacting the day and the routine and daily life.
Hmm.
And that there's sort of thresholds in talking to a doctor that they might say, yeah, that's really leaning more outside of what would be you would expect of a typical 2-year-old. One of my professors in graduate school would always say that actually the most aggressive we ever are is when we're 3 years old. So there's
Right.
a lot of typical like growing up involves like
Mhm.
someone takes your toy and you get, upset. So that is um, part of growth. But for children that are really having these behaviors that are more sort of clinically relevant, right? It's going to be at a frequency that's more than typical and or an intensity that's really
Mhm.
hard. And then I would say for parents, if you're struggling with like, oh, it's always just good to talk to your doctor or talk to someone because it
Mhm.
could be that it is sort of passing that threshold where we would want to have some support and
Mhm.
um, and I think all parents, it's good to talk, talk to a friend, ask others sort of what they're experiencing. And this is why I think this group is so important because hopefully you can talk to each other,
Mhm.
and try to
Right.
sort of figure that out a little bit together. So, yes. But I will say, young children, a lot of these things may happen, and that could be part of development, or it could be related to a diagnosis. Um, Good. Yeah. Keep coming with the comments. So,
Okay.
okay, I'm going to start to link this to stress if we're ready. Okay. I just want to say before I show more data, I'm going to show two quotes from families that have participated with us in research before, and that at any given moment in your parenting journey, you may feel a lot of different things and you may have different emotions about your experience, and that there are a variety of experiences that, not all families are going to experience a condition or a diagnosis the same or their child the same way, and that any moment in time you may experience actually both of these quotes. So I'm going to read both quotes. And again, there's not no right or wrong. It's just that everybody may have different experiences. So he is all consuming of our time, energy, patience. It can be emotionally and physically draining to be constantly vigilant of his needs. I cannot work outside the home. Is it a full-time job caring for our son? So that's sort of one frame that we can have. Another is I've tried things and done things I never would have without him, such as running for the school board and serving for 15 years. Having him has been a chance to grow in unexpected ways. And so it's a journey maybe you didn't realize you were on or didn't sign
Mhm.
up for, but there could be really great growth and change. And so I'm going to talk about stress, but I want to just emphasize that everyone has at different moments, different feelings, and that's okay.
And I also find even just on my journey is that I might feel like that first quote one
Mhm.
part of the day, and then the second part of the day, I feel like the second quote.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
can really kind of go back and forth depending on how your day's going.
yeah, absolutely. And so now I want to talk about the impact of having a child with a disability on daily life for parents. Again, for most parents, this is not something they knew was going to happen to them. What we find is that parents are very, very busy. So they are spending more time in direct caregiving for their children, even when they're older, in terms of um, the daily things of life, like toileting and feeding and those sorts of things. And that extra time and that direct caregiving comes sort of at the price of leisure activities, particularly for moms. And so there's more time in childcare, less time in leisure. Interestingly enough, we see that moms are just as likely to be out volunteering or even engaging in exercise, but have very high levels of fatigue. So over half the days, remember I talked about we talk to moms every day for 8 days. We've done this with moms with Fragile X, kids with Fragile X, autism, other types of developmental disabilities that the condition isn't known yet. So a range of different disabilities. But we see this high rate of fatigue and also interruptions at work. And I point this out because a lot of moms I talk to really want to work, and this is something they're eager to do. But it's hard when you get calls a lot, either from daycare or from the school, or you need to make a medical appointment. And so even though people are working, it's more stressful to work when you're getting these interruptions. And so when we add all it up together across the 8 days, we see a really high level of daily stress. So moms report they're almost 3 times more likely to have a stressful event on any given day than moms of kids that don't have disabilities. And so when I talk to moms, a lot of our work is with moms. We also study dads, but in talking to moms, they'll say things like, it just feels like more bad things happen to me. I just have more going on. And I will say it's because you do. You are doing more. And so what I'm here to kind of talk to us about today is thinking about let's acknowledge when and where are we doing more and think about how is that impacting our bodies and our emotions. So
Yeah.
this was
As a, I
oh,
was
go
going to
ahead.
jump in real quick. Yeah. So on the chat, we have several that's like, yeah, I have to sleep so many more hours than my other
Oh,
mom friends or my
mhm.
boyfriend.
Yes,
Even on the days I sleep well, I still wake up and I'm tired and not
yes,
rested. So yeah, just always kind of feeling that drain.
yeah. Feeling the drain is a really good expression here. So this is just another way to look at the data. These are moms with kids on the autism spectrum in this study. But we see that any kind of stress is basically amplified when you have a child
Mm.
with a disability. So more arguments or avoided arguments. So an avoided argument is where like you could have gotten into it with someone and you're like, it's not even worth going there. And so, but that has its own toll,
Mhm.
right? And again, like I was saying, more stress at work because of these interruptions, more stress at home, and then also more stress within your network. So like there's other people that you care about, they may have more stress because especially for conditions that are genetically linked and inherited conditions, I should say, that you may have nieces and nephews or, that are also having these concerns. And we know from not just in the like disability um, neurology space, but sort of in people in general, we know that stress impacts our body. So there's a connection between our mind and our body, and
Mm.
that stress can have long-term impacts on our health and well-being. And we see this in parents of kids with disabilities, in terms of mental health, daily well-being. And then cortisol is a stress hormone, and we have a lot of papers that we've looked at this in our group. And so I'm going to show you explain what cortisol is a little bit, and that can have sort of problems for your health over time. So what is cortisol and how does it work and why should you care about it? So in people that are not sort of currently sick with pneumonia or something. So when you're healthy, cortisol is a hormone that we all have in our body, and it rises up in the morning. Every morning, it should be going up. And that's sort of like our body's natural coffee. So it helps us to sort of rev up and get ready for the day's challenges. So everyone, sort of our body every day should have this sort of cortisol going up and then it goes down across the day. So by the end of the day, cortisol should be pretty low, and that's helping us to be able to get adequate rest. Um, so that's sort of the typical pattern. This is what it looks like just in a little figure. So in the morning, you can see you get up out of bed, your coffee, your body's natural coffee is at work, and then it sort of slides down across the day. And what we did in our research with many different families is we gathered cortisol these 4 times of the day for several days to try to understand what the pattern looks like for families that are caregiving for their children with disabilities. Now, I just showed you this is sort of the typical pattern and when we don't have pneumonia. um, and then here is how cortisol can become dysregulated, which is a big way of saying sort of out of whack, right? And when your cortisol is out of whack or dysregulated, you can have these physical or mental health problems. And so sort of 2 ways this can happen. One is under conditions of like psychologists would say acute stress, where your cortisol is hyperactivated. And so if you will remember maybe from like high school biology, like fight or flight response. So if you're being chased by a tiger, you're being chased by a tiger and your body will spring into action and your cortisol will go up. And that's going to help you move faster. Your eyes are going to be really like cued in and you're going to be able to try to like run away or whatever from the tiger. Okay. And so that is a type of dysregulation, but it's protective, right? We don't want to be eaten by tigers. However, our bodies are going to react to sort of things in our environment, even if they aren't tigers. So all these other kind of stressors, including like difficult behaviors, right? That our bodies can get beat up from that. If we have stress that's chronic, so it's going and going and going, what can happen to our bodies is not hyperactivation, but hypoactivation, which means that our like natural coffee isn't working very well anymore. Like it's hard to get hyped up because it's just happened too many times. Our system can't handle it. And so we see this in individuals that do shift work, for anyone who may experience post-traumatic stress disorder, people that have extreme job burnout. So these are different groups of people, not that I have not studied, but that other groups have studied to really show that when that stress just has gone on and on, that the sort of system, the cortisol in your system doesn't have that pattern anymore. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah. Can you
And
also, just a quick
yeah,
question. So I feel like you have, we're probably all in that chronic stress,
mhm,
area, but then we also
mhm,
probably have moments of acute stress,
correct.
right, too.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like, the families are also experiencing this, low and then this
yeah,
hyperactivity as well.
exactly. And um, in some of our work, and I'll go ahead and show you this. So this is the general pattern, right? So this was in the autism, moms of kids with autism. And you can see it's not that it's like zero, right? Like you have cortisol that these moms do, but it's just lower than other people. And that's what that you could think about how that links with fatigue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what we find is moms whose kids have more of those challenges during the day and those difficult behaviors. Um, that's what's leading to sort of this like pushing down of the pattern of the cortisol. So yes, but you could sort of think about it's getting harder and harder for your body to sort of go up and down so many times,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So
Well, and just reading some of the comments here too, they're saying that they have to adjust their life so much to avoid an argument or to avoid
yes,
a challenge. And
yes,
like that feeling of walking
mhm,
on eggshells, like you don't want to crack, and then the child then has an outburst or some type of
yes,
behavior. And
yes,
even a couple moms in here saying that yeah, they cannot work, and then even their husband can only work a certain amount
yes,
because of the behaviors and the interruptions at school, or they can't even
yes,
attend school anymore because the behaviors are so prevalent in their
yes.
day-to-day life.
and that's where I think that the intensity and the frequency is what becomes
Mhm.
so hard, and why I think it's important to seek um, support as a parent for your own well-being, and then also working with your doctors. Are there any supports around those behaviors? Because um, over time, it just taxes the system. So this is how you can see how it's physically taxing the body, but we also, can feel how it's taxing our routines as a family. Being able to go to your sister's wedding, all of those things can be impacted, and so it can happen kind of at different levels. Um, so what we know is cortisol that's in our body. So there's sort of this um, footprint that happens in our bodies when we have this chronic stress. And so not surprising that we may also see health symptoms. And so we see this in moms of kids with autism, Fragile X syndrome, other disabilities. This specifically is autism, but this sort of increased these are sort of daily health symptoms. So having headaches every day, or a lot of the time having just body aches and soreness, and some of this is from sort of the physical caregiving, right? But some of it is from the sort of the stress, like the psychological. Um, okay, so I just want to see. So people are tracking with me about the behaviors and then the stress. And now I want to talk about some strategies that could help. And again, I just want to emphasize, like, reaching out and getting help is important. So, okay. So this is the time all my chat friends who have been chatting. I can't see the chat, but I know you're going to tell me what they're saying. So I just
Sounds
want
good.
to pause and say, we know we've got stress going on. We all do, because to be human is to have stress. And a little stress is what keeps us alive, right? So it's not as if all stress is bad. Sometimes, like, when you're in school, you got a little stressed at taking tests, but it like helped you
Right.
like focus. So, but so how do we handle stress? And you can just put in the chat or whatever. What are things that you do? No right or wrong, just or what are some things that you do for yourself when you're feeling stressed?
Well, we already have one.
Okay.
So this individual has a counselor that they meet with
Mhm.
every month just to
Good.
validate all of their feelings and just to
Yeah.
talk,
Mm-hmm.
kind of get that
Good.
off their
Good.
plate.
Yeah. Um, I'm going to give it one more minute if anyone else wants to share what they've been doing. Again, no
We've
right or
got
wrong.
Yep.
Um,
We got a few coming in. Let's
okay,
see here. Oh, I like this one. Sex.
good.
Trying to, yeah, work off that
Yeah.
frustration. I love it. Yep. Another mom says not well. I don't have
Okay.
any strategies except venting to friends or family. So I really
Okay.
hope that the rest of this, presentation is helpful for this individual.
Yeah.
Trying to exercise,
Mm-hmm.
therapy, mom support group, eat too much.
Mm-hmm.
I can totally relate to
Mm-hmm.
that. Again, going to a therapist. Let's see her trying to have some downtime with her
Mm-hmm.
husband or, the evening to ourselves. Oh, I love that. Moms groups, especially those geared towards children like my child. Advocate with school board,
Mm-hmm. Good.
which advocate with school board is probably very empowering, but maybe still be stressful, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So here's what some people might do. And I do this activity with moms, dads, um, teachers, employers, all kinds of people. So sometimes you could laugh, you could drink wine, you could eat chocolate, go outside into nature, just binge your favorite TV, do stuff on the internet, take a bath, pray, try to get exercise. Um, or even, and so at the very end of the list on the right, you'll see positive self-talk or
Mm.
reinterpreting the situation in a positive light. So there are many different things that we can do. And some of them we may not have tried yet, and that's okay. So what do we
I
know
also
works?
love that this can give families like an actual like we're telling you you should go and eat some chocolate and drink some
Yes,
wine and go outside. Like sometimes it's nice to just have permission, right? Like,
yeah,
okay, yeah, thank you.
yeah, yeah, have
We
some
didn't say a
permission.
box of wine, but
Yes,
a glass of wine.
a glass of wine. Yes. Um, so what we know, and that this is what I want you to, I'm going to challenge everybody today to pick one strategy to try for themselves that might be something new that they haven't tried. So I'll show you some of the ideas. So what we know from research is staying connected with people in your family, like whoever was saying, like spending time like with their partner or outside your family, right? So moms groups or support groups or other friends you might have. Um, Having your environment be positive. I'm going to get into this a little bit more. Make a plan. That's what we're going to do today. So at the end of this, I want you to think, what is the thing that I could do for myself, for me, and it may be light a candle. That was one mom told me when nothing else, she would light a candle and just look at it for a little bit. Like a nice scented
I
candle,
like it.
right? So like we're all going to pick one thing we're going to try. So make a plan, recognize growth. We're all like within ourselves as adults, we're still growing. And so see how you're becoming, what type of person you can become. And then utilize respite, take time for leisure. Connect with your case manager, whoever you have, to make sure that maybe there could be some respite support for yourself. I want to just say briefly that social support can be really powerful. And this is why the Cute Syndrome Foundation, I'm going to talk about some of the things you can do together. It really does make a difference. So having more people that you know over time, you can feel less depressed and have more positive emotions. I will say the flip side of that is you don't want exposure to negative people. So if you have people that are criticizing you or blaming you, stigmatizing you, judging you, like that's not good for you over time. You want to reduce those negative people, exposure
Right.
to them, and that know that like this social support, it's sort of regardless of the difficulties your child might have. It's still going to matter having that network. Um, when moms have a lot of connections, dads feel less stressed over time. When moms and dads are getting along, um, it's easier to have a better relationship with your kid. And so like we're all connected, the whole family, an extended family, like we're kind of all in this together, and how each of these different relationships going can affect the others. And then one of the things we've seen over and over again is when it's not surprising that we would get stressed, but when we can keep the emotional intensity in our homes lower, it's associated with better health and mental health improvements over time for children, particularly related to these difficult behaviors. So I know it's hard, but if we could try to think of our homes like a sanctuary, so maybe not clean, but calm.
There you go.
That can help us. Now, psychologists love to have terms, and so there are lots of different ways to think about coping strategies, or how we cope, or how we handle our stress. And there are these two buckets that I think can be helpful to think about, and even some of the things y'all were sharing. So one bucket, we can think of them as problem focused coping. And so this is when you're recognizing you have like there's a stressor, that you are feeling stressed. And so when you're thinking, oh, I am feeling stressed, and you want to like address that. So you could say, I'm going to do something to like actively help myself feel better. So I'm going to take a bath. I'm going to light a candle. I'm going to do something to like recognize my body is not feeling good and try to like cope. You also might make a plan, like I'm saying we're going to do now. You're going to plan to light your candle today. That you might make a plan to talk to the school team, right? That you're concerned this isn't happening. And so you're going to make a plan of how to address that with the team, or with the doctor, or with the babysitter. Or you're going to say, I know I'm really stressed. How can I look at my situation differently? How can I find places to have gratitude, or to see myself growing? And really, so you're taking some action to try to move towards feeling better. The other bucket that you can see up here is emotion focused coping. And that is not so much trying to address the problem or move to a better spot. It's just sort of being in the emotion. So that would be like phoning a friend just to vent. or being in denial. Like there's so much going on. I can't even think about that happened. I'm just going to leave that over there. That's too hard to think about. Or behavioral disengagement is this idea that I'm just going to do nothing. So I'm just going to like sit and like veg out and like I'm not going to take any action. I just like need to retreat. Now, in any given moment, we could see how we might use any of these, right? Any of these
Mhm.
strategies, right? And so we want to like think about them all as like non-judgment, right? That in the moment, like you may just need to vent. Um, and so these are all different types, and so we're not going to judge them. And I want you to know that over time, I'll come back here. Um, Actually addressing your stress with these problem focused strategies is going to be better in the long run for health and well-being, right? So I think what's important is that we have a really big toolkit of coping strategies,
Mhm.
coping tools, and we want as many as possible. So if something happens, you still have another tool. And to lean towards doing things where you're actively trying to feel better or addressing the problem or thinking differently as opposed to what I kind of think of as sort of staying in those negative feelings. And so what we see over time is things like venting or being in denial. In the long run, that can lead to more feelings of depression. Whereas taking action or making a plan or you know, doing your exercise, right? That's going to, in the long run, be associated with better well-being. And so I really want everybody just for a minute, coming back to what we know from research, if you could just think for yourself, um, knowing all the different things, like think about what is your coping toolkit. I know I heard someone say, I don't really have a toolkit. So how could we start really small? Whether that is thinking about listening to music that's soothing to you, or, could you take 5 minutes to make a list, right? To get it out of your head and write it down so you can go to sleep. What would be, some things that you might want to try, or calling a therapist, or that, like these don't have to be big things, but what would be some ways that we could use strategies that we know from research can help with coping? So in the long run, again, I don't judge any moment of any day, right? But in the long run, what are things that are going to lead to more of that thriving and good, positive psychological well-being? So you don't have to put in the chat, but I just want to sort of challenge everybody. If you could think of a strategy, something that you might want to try, like just in the next week, right? That could be something that you
Yeah.
could do for yourself. Um,
And
so
I love to, I think so much of the time when you're thinking about this, self-help type of topics is or self-care, a lot of times you go straight to, having to have a whole day to, go to the spa or do this or do that. And really, sometimes it's the small things that really add up. And
yeah,
there's several different things
yeah,
in the
yeah,
chat too, like finding one activity that you love and do it once a week.
yeah,
Or someone says that sparkle lights, like the twinkle lights and stuff, that makes them, feel good. And so having those sporadically around the
mhm,
house, or the, like the turning on a lighting a candle or things like that. Oh, there's a good one, engaging my child in making a plan so they can be kind of
oh,
part of that
good
as well. I like
together.
that.
Yeah, that's
That's
great.
a great one.
I'm all about the twinkle lights. I keep Christmas lights up
Yes.
in my house, inside the house all year long because I like couldn't take them down. It makes me too happy.
Right.
Yeah. So
I
I think
had
those are good.
Yeah, I talked to, or I think it was on a podcast I was listening to one time, and this mom she bought like, a kit of those timed candles that you put batteries
Mhm,
in, and
mhm.
then she would put them all over her house.
Yeah.
And she had them to where it was on a timer. And when it started to, I think it was like 5 o'clock. So when
Mm,
she got home, all the candles would be lit,
yeah.
and just had that like ambiance of like, oh, okay, I can relax, and this is my calm place. So I was like, wow, how great is that? And that's like what, $20, of getting one of
Yeah.
those packages. And so I'm like, that's a great one. So I have a couple of those myself.
That's good. Well, and I once, again, it doesn't even have to be very big. I once had a mom tell me that before she gets out of the car, like she just like will sit and like
Mhm.
just sit in the car for a little bit and breathe and like really likes to just like look at the trees and when she parks the car before like going in the house or whatever. So I think that
Yeah.
really know yourself and think for your whole family, right? Like what are the other things for other family members that are helpful? I also want to say, and I'm gonna just show you some resources and we can have more chatting, but these are ways again for coping. And I think coping, why we're talking about it, right? I know that there is stress and we want to be particularly as people who love our kids, we want to be around for as long as we can and our very best
Mhm.
selves for them and for ourselves and for other people we love, so we want to cope. And if you're feeling like your child is having these difficulties that are keeping them from going to school or keeping them from being able to do things that they or you want them to do, it's really good to talk to your care team and see if there might be some behavioral supports, positive behavior supports, behavioral interventions um, can be effective. And so getting hooked up with the right type of support to address some of those behaviors. So we're talking about coping and everyone can do that, but don't feel that you have to sort of bear it all alone, right? So seek professional
Mhm.
support either for your child and your concerns about them or for your own self and your own mental health. Um, so again, it's really good to connect with people. We want it to be, when we connect with people, we want those people to be positive and non-judgmental. So many of the families I've worked with over time do feel really judged and blamed and stigmatized and have received so many sort of critical comments over time. And I think that when you're feeling that from people, it's good to think through, well, who is not judging me and who is not being critical of me and finding those people and make a plan, recognize growth, and really do that time for leisure. So if you're getting out and exercising, like don't feel guilty for doing that. Keep doing it. Go have sex.
Mhm.
Like, like these are good things.
I love it.
Yeah. So here again, this is what we know from research. Yay, the Kuchinder
Yay.
Foundation. Yay. And I am not obviously the expert in all of these things, but I did get some of the things that y'all have going on. And so the book club, life
Mhm.
coaching, I think can be really, really great. Um, um, the grief recovery method, because this is part of life as grief too. So we want to make sure that people are accessing those resources. And I'm assuming you can like send these around and it's on the website and people can find them. But
Oh, yes. Yeah,
okay, great.
absolutely.
So these meetups, I think sound really awesome. And maybe if it's close enough to where y'all live, these family gatherings sound really good. I know for different rare conditions when I've been to their sort of family meetings, it just feels so good. And so, again, a place where you're not judged, where you're seen and known, and that you can be together. And I will just make a plug as a researcher. Like anytime you can participate in research, that does carry forward to help other families, even if it may not affect your family. And
Mhm.
then these assistant grants sound really good. These pop-up events. I just would encourage everybody to lean into the foundation,
Mhm.
right? And this community, and particularly like an online community, that you are not alone. And it may feel that way, but there are other families walking this journey. Everybody's journey is different, but there are families with similar experiences. And again, I'm just going to harp on everybody. Please try to expand your coping toolkit because it's better for all of us if we don't just always go to venting. That's my sort of big takeaway. So let's think if there's anything else that we could try to challenge ourselves in the next week to try a new idea. And I like mentioned, I have a huge team of collaborators and colleagues and students and all the families that have participated over 1,000 families have participated in research with us over time, and we're so grateful. And also, just to give a plug, I wouldn't know what I know about how to give families recommendations if the government, NIH, had not supported research. So I will stop there.
Awesome. Thank you, Leanne. And also thanks, for hitting on some of those programs that we do offer. And, one thing that I think that the acute syndrome has really trying to focus on is that social emotional well-being. And that I think so much of the time we are pouring everything we have into our kids, but then we don't have anything left for ourselves. And when we think about like our biggest fears are what's going to happen if our children outlives us. And this is just hard data, right? This is research showing that what we are experiencing is leading to these health concerns. And so as much as I know it's so hard to find time to do, this self-reflection, self-care, but how important it is for our mental health, our physical health, all of those things. And so, we do have these programs, and we're going to be asking here, in the next couple months of, are these meeting the needs, or do we need to shift focus in 2025? What do you guys want to see? What would be helpful for you? And so, yeah, I want to make sure that everyone knows that they're invited to these. We're all on different journeys, but we're on them together. And I really want to make sure that everyone understands that regardless of what your life looks like, we all want to come together, and we all want to hear about our stories and feel heard and feel that they're in this non-judgmental space to be able to do that. I love it. Well, I was gonna jump into the chat just a few minutes. I think we just got a few minutes here left, but um, yeah, there's two that talk about breathing, and I think that is just remarkable because it's these little things that we forget sometimes, right? And we're just taking these short breaths, and we're almost putting ourselves into an anxiety attack, right? And so taking some big deep breaths and trying to get her thoughts together so then she's not lashing out when these behaviors
Very
happen, which
good.
is great.
We have in Wisconsin, there's a very world famous mindfulness researcher, and he talks a
Mm,
lot about the benefit is in the breath.
mm,
So it's getting more oxygen.
mhm,
So just, yeah, breathing. I cannot emphasize that enough, that we're not getting enough air a lot.
mhm. Another one mentioned just taking 10 minutes. Take 10 minutes of downtime. And this kind of correlates to actually Shelly, one of my colleagues. So she talked about making herself a cup of tea, and how she would make a cup of tea in the afternoon, and it was always at the same time. And she would make herself sit down and not do anything but focus on the tea until it was gone. And so that would be her downtime, that would be her tea time. And I thought that's just, that is
Brilliant.
genius,
That's really
right?
good.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's these small things that really do start to add up. And so I'm hoping that everyone has written something down, something that they want
Make a
to
plan
make a plan.
to try a new strategy.
Yeah, and even if it's something small, or if you want
Mhm.
to join us on book club this month, or however you want to show up for yourself. But I hope you make that plan because we would love to be a part of it. Awesome. Well, can you think of anything else before we wrap up?
No, no, I just encourage people to make that plan and yeah, try to show up for some of these things that feel meaningful to you. So show up for yourself. That's great.
I love it. Show up for yourself. Love it. Well, as we wrap
Oh,
up,
how about kids
yeah.
distress? Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I think that, yeah, try to understand, everybody knows their children the best. And again, you can teach kids belly breathing. So, or like blow up a balloon. What does it look like? And teach them to do that in their own
Mhm.
body. I think is really, yeah. And then art or being outside or, not all children are quite ready for some of the cognitive behavioral strategies or things. But yeah, a lot of sensory. That's really good.
Mhm.
Sometimes those big hugs, having the squishmallows to squeeze. Yeah. Um, and if you have an occupational therapist to talk to,
Mm,
either through the school district or through Birth to Three, they often are like really good at some of those de-stressing, self-regulatory, self-regulation kind of a strategy. So I would really think about that for everybody in the family, including any siblings, right? Sometimes
mhm.
siblings are carrying around some stress and maybe not knowing how to talk about it. So
Right.
um, those sort of family outdoor activities where we're getting messy and just breathing, breathing.
I was going to put a plug in here. So my daughter has a Tony box. I don't know if you've seen these
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
So the Tony box, and you have the little figurines that you put on top, and what they have several that are meditation. And so they have partnered with Calm. And so they have a whole
Um,
meditation, and they tell
uh-huh.
you when to breathe and how to do that. And
Okay.
I mean, you could work with it with
Mhm.
toddlers, very young
Uh-huh.
ages, and they
Yeah.
still would be able to follow along. And so I got one for my daughter. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. If
Good.
anything, it's just a nice, calm
Uh-huh. Yes.
environment.
Good. Yeah, I love that. It's her Alexa.
Right.
Good.
That is funny. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming
Yeah.
on, Dr.
Yeah,
DeWalt. We are just thrilled to have you, and I hope that we can continue to kind of foster this
absolutely.
relationship
Mhm.
and help out in any way we can. And I'll also put a plug in here for our sponsors. And so we have our platinum sponsor, Neurocrine Biosciences, and our gold sponsor, Praxis Precision Medicines. And without them, we would not be able to be here and having these conversations. So we really, really appreciate all their support for our community. All right, everyone. Well, I'm going to wrap up here. Have a lovely day. I hope you go light a candle or eat some chocolate.
Yeah.
And I hope to see you at some of our social emotional programming. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.